Hey, welcome to the part 2 of the effective test automation session. We have seen the previous part 1, the effective test automation process chart, and we have seen how to prepare the regression test suites also, and we are ready to utilize these regression test suites for different purposes. Now let us move to other slide, what it says from the blog content. If you see the blog site, this is the one of the pages I have in that link. The following steps details the different process steps used in the process chart. Let us recap all those things from this slide perspective. Initially, the product functionalities need to be identified from the test documentation of unit test, integration test, system test, and user acceptance test. Let us say a typical development lifecycle will have unit testing, integration testing, system testing, and user acceptance testing. In these phases of the testing, each phase will have different scenarios, and those all are decomposed to perform that particular test phase criteria. Let us say unit test can be there with the developer where the developer need to check some kind of validations, and at the same time integration test scenario can be there to connect to other components by integrating them technically and performing a kind of integrated test scenario to verify the functionality. At the same time, system test also can be considered for connecting to different features, product features, and UAT also can be considered for a particular business scenario. Now let us see some examples from the e-commerce process chart. If you see the previous process chart, in this chart let us identify these scenarios. Now if I am a developer, let us say a customer entered details from the web page. Now that particular web page data is storing or not, I am supposed to verify as a developer of that particular web page. My test criteria is key in the data in the front end page and see in the back end whether those all are stored it, because I can't redisplay it because I don't have that redisplay page in my development tasks. So being a developer, I have developed one page where I need to enter the customer details and make sure it is storing in my database. So I am supposed to verify the front end details what I have entered it, and supposed to go back to the database and query that through SQL and verify that. That is the test requirement for unit testing. Now let us say this particular process where customer details entered and customer need to reconfirm it entered details are appearing correctly. To confirm that, there should be another component of the development area. There are two components. One is entry page is there, second one is display page is there. So the entry page is given to one developer, the display page confirmation is given to another developer. These are the two tasks bifurcated by the tech lead or development lead. So now these two developers need to integrate this particular build in one environment, make sure data is getting entered into the database, writing the record, and at the same time the query is executing to bring the data into the web page. So this particular integrated test scenario can be considered under integration testing phase. Now what is system testing? System testing, when it comes, let us say the customer came and he's logged in and entered the details, customer details, and after that verified it. After verification, confirmation is there. So it means third component, confirmation is there. So these three components are integrated through different integration builds, and you are considering them as a feature. So verify the customer details. For verification, you need to have entry, again verifying that, confirming it. So these three are part of the system test scenario. This is example, typical example we can take from this chart of e-commerce application. And let us say, what is the UAT scenario, user acceptance test scenario? If I am a user, I am going to say being a user, I want to enter my details, and later on I should be given access to book the products. So my requirement is I want to book the products as business user. So I will be sitting on the web page, internet, and I will be logging in, and after that my login should be permitted to access the products. Those details, product details, will be entered into the database, what I choose it, the price, such kind of thing, quantity, all those things. Then later on I will be able to view them in another page on the booked history, booking history. Then later on I will be confirming my booking, and I will be paying the payment gateway process through credit card or net banking. Then I will be confirming my order, and once the order is released it, I will be getting the shipment details, and later on I will be getting tracking ID of the shipment by courier or shipment, whatever way it is. So these all are the process steps involved, sub process steps involved. I want to book the item on using the online store. So this is the UAT scenario, can be considered it. Now let us go back to that previous slide. So here we are from this area. So different phases of the testing, we have analyzed the requirements, test requirements, from unit testing to integration testing, then system testing, and user acceptance testing. In each test phase the scenarios are different, the tasks are different. So when it comes to UAT, it is a very high level scenario. These are the differences can be identified by the testers or test engineers who is going to be responsible for automating the test requirements, and those can be bifurcated for different phases of the testing for reusage of the scripts. Let us see second part. Test cases, manual test scripts should be identified or defined. Those can be automated by testing tool. It means we have seen in the manual process from the previous, this is the process we are talking there. There is a slight difference between test requirement and the test cases. Obviously we have seen that, we have discussed it. Using these test requirements, you can make a requirements traceability by mapping the test cases to them. You can recollect the test requirements traceability matrix in any HDLC project. This is similar to it, which is here. You have test requirement, you identified all these things, and let us say in the documentation part you identified the test requirements matrix, and those you will be using them, which is manual, which is automated script in the matrix. So those can be utilized it. For manual it will go here, this is manual, and this is about the automation part will come here for GUI testing tool, and this is the test script, automated test script. Those can be used it. And when you use the mapping matrix, test requirements matrix, you can identify which can be used for manual, which can be used for automated, and if the scripts are ready, you can give the reference in the matrix itself. So this particular test requirement matrix is a kind of tracking sheet as well as scheduling sheet for the sequence of the tests while executing it. Now let us come back for this. The test requirements, test cases and test data need to be made ready before going for automation. Obviously they should be ready. That is the process we have used it. The GUI software which has to be automated for regression tests should be analyzed for test automation. Let us go back to the chart. Now when you say GUI software, the application which you are going to use it, that is called as GUI software in this process chart. The application software for test automation need to be identified, and it should be tested manually with all these identified test cases and test data in one cycle at least. So once it is passed, then only you are going to consider for automation. Whatever identified test requirements are there for automation, and whatever data you have identified, whatever test case you have identified for the criteria, test criteria, those all will be applied, executed at least in one cycle to make sure the build is stable for using the tool. If the build is not stable, if you are running them, there will be issues with testing tool, because test tool will not be able to grab the particular function, particular icons, particular libraries, all those things. So there will be issues. So GUI software should be tested at least one cycle for the test scripts which you are going to make it. The reusable components under test automation need to be identified under automation framework design. You can name them as functional or reusable library. You can refer on how to apply the reusable code practices through my blog. So when you say reusable components, means it is nothing but this particular automation framework, identified framework functions for automation. This particular framework functions can be repeatable, and these can be identified and documented in a tracking sheet against to the test requirements. Let us say if you have taken the previous example, application example, in this we have seen the user ID verification. In that we have identified a function where authentication, authorization, confirmation, such kind of things, and when that particular test requirement comes in any of the test phases, verify the user ID, you need to mention there whether it has some functions, automation framework functions. Those functions need to be identified, and it should be documented under tracking sheet. You can use it, this test requirement matrix, and insert some of the columns to identify that particular scripts and document them also, where it can be a very huge tracking sheet, and it can be made easier for any kind of role like manual tester, automation tester, and even the developers also can go through that, and when they run the scripts for integration test criteria entry point, they might see the build stability before announcing the CIT, I mean component integration testing. Now this particular reusable code practices are mentioned in the blog site. You can see that also to understand. There is a example used it with a lot of design steps also under different sprint planning sessions, where you will get a kind of feeling how you can utilize this particular test automation for reusable libraries also, along with the development reusable libraries. The test scripts need to be designed as per the test cases specifications after analyzing the test automation. It means whatever we have analyzed it, like test cases, test requirements, those need to be followed for right specifications. Once the test scripts are being developed using framework and test cases, they need to be retrieved it. This is a kind of code review with testing tools proprietary language. Let us say you have a testing tool here, you have a GUI software, you used it for developing scripts using the framework functions, using the design scripts, and you will be doing a code review, and once it is done you will pass to the unit testing. The developer test script need to be unit tested to ensure that they can function as per the test automation requirements by using different data sets. We have seen that in the chart. this particular unit testing, and it is ready for regression testing once the unit test is passed. Once the scripts are being unit tested, the regression suites need to be prepared. It depends on the type of tests or phases of the like UT unit testing, IT integration testing, ST system testing, and UAT user acceptance test. The regression test scripts can be prepared. It so for different requirements, different test phases, those can be planned. It the regression test suites can be used for each release of the software to conduct a regression testing cycles of different test phases, as we discussed in the previous examples in the first line of this slide. In every test plan there can be entry criteria. Let us say you have ST criteria, all the IT scripts need to be passed. Let us say you have a system testing, you will have different teams in any organization for different phases of the testing. Integration testing team can be different, system testing team can be different. When system test schedule is ready, there will be a task given in the project plan like system test entry criteria execution. During that time the integration test scripts can be used it, and it can be tested it whether it is qualified for system test execution. Using these IT scripts that can be performed it. This way it can save your testing cycle time, and you can get a feel of ST system test phase can be started for build certification. If IT scripts are failed, right away you can reject the system test phase execution and stop the testing also to correct that particular issues, whether those can be environmental issues, those can be functional issues, technical issues, any kind of things. Depends on the software product enhancements. Sometimes the manual and automated test scripts can be impacted. It means you have identified in the matrix, test requirement matrix, what all the requirements belongs to manual and automated. So you need to follow a sequence of the steps by using the scenario, and make sure once the automated test is completed you will be following a manual test if it is to be done through manual, and later on you might prefer to come back to the automation script, second script, then second manual testing. Like that sequencing need to be done it. Then they need to be maintained to modify or enhance or add new items to the automation regression test suites. What is maintenance here? The maintenance of the test suites are nothing but the new builds when they are coming. If the design changes are there, if new requirements are added, those need to be identified in the developed scripts, and those need to be updated in relevance or in relation to the application builds. Let us say if you take this particular example here, and user, if you take this particular example, the user wanted to incorporate some of the checkboxes. It means that particular web page need to be updated by incorporating the checkboxes to validate it. So it means unit testing is involved in that, integration testing is involved in it, system testing is involved in it, UAT user definitely will check whether that design is applied in the new build. So when you have such kind of things, the existing scripts will fail there. That's the reason you need to maintain, to modify or enhance or add new items to the automation regression test suites. Sorry. This is a mandatory task to manage the test automation practices constantly. If you don't maintain the test scripts, it is just like you are leaving them alone, and when you are planning to use them, they are not going to work at all. So parallelly, when you are running the testing teams effectively, if you are doing a test automation practices, there should be test engineers where they are responsible to make sure maintaining the test scripts are happening and the test regression test suites are updated timely for the next releases. Let us say you have a plan of sprint 1 planning. In sprint 1 planning you have new design, and that is going to be rolled over to sprint 2. Then in sprint 2 the automation engineer need to consider the sprint 1 design areas, identify the test scripts, those can be automated, and in sprint 2 planning he can reuse them for reducing the cycle time reduction. Then again in sprint 2 you have a new scripts, you have new design requirements, those also should be considered for automation in sprint 3 planning. So like that incrementally one need to plan it for test automation builds also. Once the release is made, all these scripts can be used for next release also. Let us say Agile practices has got 5 iterations or 4 iterations. All these iterations are called sprint planning also. Sprint 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each sprint will have regression test suites. So every time when the automation engineer is working for new scripts addition, at the same time he need to make sure the scripts are maintainable for regression test suites. If there are changes happened, you need to grab that changes and you need to update the scripts using the tools process, using the automation development process for making the test automation as an effective practices in the organization. So that's all in this session, and thanks for watching this video. And if you have any questions, please go to my blog site, and I have given my personal details to contact me. And for any kind of support in these lines, I am open to help you. Please contact me.